Obviously, in the early days, nobody really knew. Like CrossFit as a sport was relatively new. And if you think about the methodology, if you're only going in for an hour a day, 5 times a week, that hour, it is all about the intensity, and that's where the results come from. So when you're then going from that mindset and then trying to compete in the sport, you still think, right, I've got to max out my lift. I've got to go full send on this Metcon. I've got to rowing intervals. I've got to be hitting max capacity every time. And then you soon realize, because you're not just training that 1 hour, you're actually training, probably back in those days, it was like 3 to 4 hours. And then you're training like sometimes 6-7 days a week. Yeah. Your body can't sustain that. And I would say that a lot of athletes experience burnout or got injured. And that's when you start to be like, oh shit, we can't do this. And I think that's where a lot of athletes then started to get the help of like experienced coaches, start to work with teams. And it then really progressed into what I would compare to a professional sport. It wasn't just individuals winging it. It had to be that you were following a structure, you had periodization, and it became like any other sport.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Before you got to that point, were you finding that you were looking at all the other outlets as far as nutrition and recovery and those things? So you were just full sending and realizing like, well, now I'll get my diet on track and then I'll really focus on recovery, before you realize like, nope, I'm really reaching my limit potential? Or did you kind of go reverse? You just went held the wheels and then started adding those things in later, once you realize there was, how do I maximize doing this if I'm going to do it this hard all the time?
Yeah, I think that's definitely another issue, is nobody really knew how to fuel to be a CrossFit athlete either. Like, especially in the early days, like I was paleo. I was like competing on like 0 carbs.
Yeah.
And it's like, it wasn't until like a few years later where people were like, oh, these athletes are competing from like 8 a.m. in the morning until 8 p.m. at night for multiple days. It's like, they need to be taking on carbs. They need to be taking on like sugars. And so it was just, I think, very much a little steep learning curve in the first few years. And it's definitely kind of like changed the sport. And I think with that came the big jump in just how good the athletes were. The athletes are no longer overtraining. They're getting adequate recovery. They're getting the right nutrition. So all of a sudden, the level of what the competitors were took a huge like jump. And I think we're seeing another jump now coming in the level of competitors with the teenagers coming through.
Sure.
These are the ones that have like started the sports when they were 7 and had all this knowledge and had like this progression from an early age, haven't had to make these mistakes and then come through. And it's going to be interesting to see over the next like 2 or 3 years, just all these teenagers come through. I think there'll be a big change in the faces that we see at the games.